Hi, I'm Sripath. We have worked on project component 4. So initially we are starting out with um, a servlet project on NetBeans. So this has the login Java file. As we can see here, we are trying to import all the necessary libraries in order to work with the servlet. So before starting out with the program, we add two dependencies here, one for database connectivity and one for in order to work with servlets. So there are two dependencies here. So initially we try to make a connection to the database in order to get the data from database. So what we are trying to do is here is as this is a login page, you're trying to match the username and password in the login table in the database and trying to get the certain SSN whose username and password matches. So initially you're trying to make a connection here, and you're trying to execute the query which results in getting the certain SSN based on matching username and password. So as you can see here, we are passing two arguments, user and pass, which we get from the URL which we pass or use while using or working with Tomcat server. So we are just concatenating these parameters user and pass into the query in order to get the result. Once we execute the query, we'll be able to get the result, and we are storing the result in a string result. So if we find a certain username and password in the login table, we store the resulting SSN with a flag saying yes. If we did not find anything with the same username and password that we passed here, we result in a string saying no. So when we work with JSPs and servlets, we generally try to use try and catch blocks in order to handle any errors. So once we are done with the program, we try to build it by clicking this. Once the program has been built, there's a file you can find in the project folder. So you'll be able to find a login.class file in the target classes. So this file should be pasted onto the webin folder which we created inside the Sleepy Hollow folder on web apps folder in Apache Tomcat server. So I have just copy pasted the same file here, and now we'll be proceeding with info.jsp. So once we are done with the login servlet, we then move on to the info.jsp, which gets the employee details. So as you can see here from the query, we just get the employee name and employee sales based on the SSN. So it's basically the same process over again. So we are trying to connect to the DB once again, and we are trying to execute the query. So if we get some result, we are trying to store it into the result string variable, and we are trying to print it out to the Tomcat server or the web page. So when you enter the URL by passing the certain SSN, the query will execute and then display the respective result onto the web page. And what you're trying to do here is so you open a connection when you want to connect to the database. It's always a good practice to close the connection in order to avoid any errors, and you're just printing out the result onto the web page here. As you can see here, I've just navigated my way through into the bin folder on Apache Tomcat server. So here you can find startup shells and shutdown shells in order to start and stop the Tomcat server. So I'm just starting up my Tomcat server here. As you can see, Tomcat has started. So we're just gonna try out login servlet on Tomcat server now. So I have my URL here already. So we are just passing the user and pass parameters. I have given Vijay333 as user, and this as password here. Once I hit enter, I should be able to get the result. So as you can see, it found these details, both username and password, in the database. So it was able to successfully return the resulting string which we have coded here. So that's the same output we are getting here, but in addition with the matching SSN like which matched username and password. So the same the same goes for info.jsp as well. So the info.jsp takes only a single argument, which is the SSN. So as you can see here, it has written the employee name and his sales value, both separated by two different symbols. So all through all the JSPs, we have this notion of using a comma to separate the columns and a hash to separate the rows.
So in transactions.jsp, we are establishing the connection again with the database, and then we are performing the following query where we select the transaction ID and transaction date and amount from transactions where the SSN is given by the user. Here we are formatting the date, transaction date, as per our liking, as when we pull the transaction date, it usually comes along with the time as well, so it's not necessary for our project. So we just format it according to this, where we get years, months and dates, and then we print the transaction ID, transaction date and amount on the web browser and close the connection. Going on to the transaction details.jsp, here we perform the same connection again. Here what we are doing is we are trying to pull the product name, price, quantity, date from tables by joining tables transaction and transaction products, where the transaction ID is equal, and then products, we are joining the table products and transaction prods table where the product ID is matching, and using the transaction ID. We perform the same formatting of date here as well and print the following product name, price, quantity and date here, and then close the connection. Going on to the awards ID.jsp, we are pulling the award ID from the table granted where SSN is given by the user, and we are printing it here and closing the connection. Then performing, I'll just show you the performing these queries. Here we are just giving the SSN number to perform the transactions. As you can see the different transaction IDs and the date. So in transaction details.jsp, we are passing the transaction ID. For that we get the following details, that is product name, price, quantity and the date. Going on to the award IDs.jsp, where we pass the SSN number, we are getting the following award ID.
To the granted details.jsp file, here same as the previous JSP files, here we are establishing the connection to the database server, and here we are using the query to extract the award date, center name from the award centers table by joining with the granted table, and here we use the award ID and SSN to get these details from these two tables, and we store the result of this query in the result rs, and this rs is stored in the string result, and if this result will displace in the DB as the award date and center name, and here we use the date format to change the date as in the previous JSP files. And coming to the next JSP file, which is transfer.jsp, this is the same connection we established in all the JSP files, and here we use the insert query to get the SSN of the user who is using the this application, and to SSN means the destination user to which the amount is transferring to, and the transfer date on which the amount has been transferred, and the amount number, and we are inserting all these details to the table in the DB. So we store the result in the query string, and if this string is greater than 0, like if the value amount of the value is greater than 0, then the output is successful, or else it will display as failed. And now I will show the how the output will displays in the Tomcat page. And here this is the granted details .jsp file, and here we use the award ID. The award ID is 3 here we gave for the user, and the SSN number is this one. And if we run this URL, then the date and the award date and award center will displays in the page. And this is the granted details.jsp. And when we come to the transfer.jsp file, this is a particular URL given to the transfer.jsp, and here we are using the sender SSN. This is the sender SSN we used, and the destination SSN, this is the SSN which the user receives the amount, and this is the particular amount, the amount sent from the sender to the receiver. And when we run this query, here you can see like it displays as successful. As the amount is greater than 0, the output is successful.
Coming to the Android app, I just created a project in the Android Studio by the name Sleepy Hollow. So these are the files you can see here. We have 6 activities, so we'll be having 6 screens on the app, and each activity has a respective XML in which we can drag and drop and design the way the screen looks when we run the app. So starting with the main activity .java, this is the first file we are going to run in order to start the app. So initially, before starting out with the project, as you can see here in the project folders, this is a folder called libs, which was created by me. So we just copy pasted the volley.jar here. So initially when we pasted the volley.jar, for the first time it shows an option here to add it as a library. Since I already added it, we are not seeing the option here right now. So once I do that, we'll be able to use volley.jar for the request queues in our program. There's also another thing to do before starting out with the app. So we have to mention certain permissions in the Android manifest.xml. So the first thing is the user's permission tag, where we let the Android know or give the permission to use the internet. And also we mention clear text traffic is set to true here. So initially Android does not allow clear text transmission over servers. It generally by default supports encrypted text transfers. So in order to make it simple, and for the purpose of this project component 4, we are setting its flag to true, which helps us in transmitting clear text over servers. And also we are also since we added the volley.jar here, so the Android Studio must be intimated that we are using third-party libraries. So in order to let it know that we are using volley.jar, we must add this line as well. So we are all set to proceed with main activity.java now. So getting into this code, as you can see here, we have certain login, certain text views where the user inputs username and password. So as you can see here, we have this username input field and password input field and a login button. So whatever we drag and drop here is identified in the program by their respective ID. So as you can see here, we found them by using this find view by ID. And so we're using set on click listener. So basically this part of the code will be dealing with what happens when you click on the login button. So you're reading the input from the username field and the password field, and you're creating a request which uses the volley.jar or volley library. So this is the same URL that we've been using for the Apache Tomcat server, but there is a slight change here. For some purpose, Google or Android Studio um, have this thing where this is a standard rule. So generally for Apache it's like 127 dot 1 point something like that, but while coming to the Android Studio we must use 10.0.2.2 in order for the URL to work. So basically I have copied the same URL by editing this ID, and it's basically the same. So again you're accessing login.class, you're passing username, but this time you're inputting the username that the user has entered in the app. So the same goes for the password as well. So coming to the string request, we are creating a request in order to handle the data or get the result output after running the login.class or servlet. So the result that we get on the Apache server when we run the login servlet is taken into the string s here. So in order to remove any white spaces, I'm using trim. And if you remember, we had a result saying yes colon and their respective SSN based on matched username and password. So initially we are trying to split the string s, which is the result based on colon. So you get two strings here, one is SSN, one in, and one is decision variable, which is yes or no based on the execution of the query. So you are passing that decision variable to the switch case here, and if it's yes, you are creating an intent to pass on the SSN to the next activity. So you can proceed further with next JSP, and if it's a no, then you are representing the same in the toast to the user through the app. And if it's not both yes and no, then if it's some other case, by default it displays some unexpected response, and the user will be able to know that there is some unexpected error. So the string request contains four important parameters. One is the get method, one is the URL which you are trying to access through the Tomcat server, and one is the response listener. And for the purpose of this assignment we just use null here, but instead if you want to actually implement an error handler, this goes here instead of null. So every request must be added onto the queue in order to work. So I'm implementing the same here. So considering that we get certain SSN and the flag is yes, we are passing the SSN from main activity to main activity 2.java here. So coming on to main activity 2, we also have the XML for this, where we drag and drop certain buttons and views that we want. So I have imported all of them by their IDs here, and we are making another request here. And as I pass the intent from main activity.java, I'm receiving it here using get intent. So I just sent a string by the name SSN, and I'm accessing it here to store the SSN. So there are two URLs here basically, because the second screen contains the images. So we just place the images in Tomcat folder. So we just picked up some random SSNs, 5 SSNs, and named according to the SSNs, named the images according to the SSNs. So first what we do is the info.jsp, as explained earlier, it takes in the SSN and gets the employee name and his sales value, his or her sales value. So the string URL for the images is also the same, but a slight change is that we are trying to access the images folder based on the SSN and with extension JPG. So we create a string request again for displaying the employee name and getting his sales values. So it's the same process all over again, but this time we have a row which ends by hash and column separated by comma. So we have employee name and sales value. So it's two columns here. This is the logic to separate the columns, and I'm displaying a sales value to sales value string, and I'm setting the text views to display the information on the app. I'm also adding request to the queue in order for it to work. So coming here, we have this image request. So generally we use bitmaps here. Bitmap is something which gets the image by its pixels. So these are the parameters that are needed. These are generally the same. So generally we use 0 0 and null null most of the time. So you also add a image request to the queue here, and there are these buttons which when clicked on you will be transferred to a certain page. So let's say we have transactions button, we have transaction details, we have award details, and transfer. So these when clicked on will be redirected to their respective pages, and they will be accessing their respective JSPs when needed. So this is basically main activity 2 .java, and we also have a exit button here, which when clicked on the user will be redirected back to the login screen once he is done with all his work. So this is basically main activity 2.
Following on to the main activity 3, here we have the following text views, that is display transactions, date display, amount display, and we are using intent to pull the information from the previous page. We are pulling the SSN ID and concatenating into the URL. On response, we have the following transaction result string, where we trim all the white spaces from it, and we are storing it into a string array, where transaction result array, and we are splitting it in based on the table into columns and rows. So here we are using concat string, date cat and amount cat to calculate the following details and store them into the following strings. We have the following columns where we concatenate the following details into these strings accordingly and display them in new lines. Going on to the main activity 4, here we have the following text views: prod display, total sum date, and price display and quantity display. We also have a spinner and its array list, where we store all the list of items which are going to be displayed in that spinner. We use the same intent to pull the information of SSN ID from the previous page and concatenate it into the transactions URL. Then on response, we follow the same procedure, where we store the result into the transaction result and trim the white spaces, and then we use the split to split the data into columns and rows and store it into the array, transaction result array. Here what we are doing is we are using this to store all the transaction columns and then add them into the list, which will be displayed in the spinner. Going on to the on response, we have the result transaction string, where we store the result of it. Then we concatenate them accordingly to display the transaction price, quantity, and date along with the sum. In this for loop, we calculate the sum of the prices and display them accordingly.
This is the main activity 5.java page, and here we added the all text view spinners to the Java file, and here we use the same JSP award ID page which we used in the JSP file, and this is a code for the spinner, and here we collect all the award IDs to the spinner by using the list, and then this is the code for the award date and award center, and we split all the rows and columns to the by using the for loop, and we concatenate the award date and centers based on the details of the user, and then we use the JSP URL here for the grant details page, and we receive the table which contains award date and award center. and this is the main activity Java file. And coming to the main activity 6.java, here we inserted all the text views, buttons, and here the intent is used here to receive from the previous page, which is the granted page, granted.jsp page, and here the destination SSN is stored in the string, and transfer amount all is stored in the string. The URL used here is transfer.jsp by using the destination SSN and source SSN and transfer amount. Here we are inserting all these details in the JSP file. By using this, if the JSP file displays successful, then the transfer executed successful message will be displayed here, and if it is failed, the transfer failed message will be displayed. And this is a default, and which will break from the switch case. And this is the main activity 6.java.
Now I'm trying to run the app here. Once we click on run, we should be able to see the app. So we have started our app. Let's try to enter in the login details here. So I have entered my username and password, and I'm clicking on login now. So it found matching details in the login table in the DB, and we are able to move to the next screen. So you also saw a toast pop up at the bottom of the screen saying yes, and it displayed the SSN of the current user. So these are the transactions that this employee is involved in. So these are the transaction details. So we can see the spinner here, and the spinner has loaded each transaction ID. So when I click on a different transaction ID, it displays all the products associated with that particular transaction ID, and also we can see the date and the total sum that has been sold by this employee. And also we can see the award details. Since there is only one award ID for this particular employee, the spinner has loaded a single value, which you can see here. And also we have a transfer screen where this particular employee can send some amount to other employee using their respective SSN. So for now I'll be picking up some SSN from the DB. Let's say I want to pick this SSN, and I'll try to send him an amount. 6. Let's say I want to send him some 500, and when I click on transfer, I should be successfully able to send him the transfer. So as you can see here, the transfer is executed successfully, and let's go to the DB. Let's see if it gets reflected here. We can see that this transfer is reflecting in the DB. So I have sent to this particular SSN, so it has recorded today's date and the amount was 500. So we were successfully able to record the transfer and execute it. Coming back to the Android application, since we are done with the transfer, I'm just moving back to the previous screen. So now, as we are done with all the operations that we have to perform, I'm just clicking on exit. So this should take us back to the login screen. So as you can see, when I hit the exit button, we are back to the login screen, and we are able to successfully run all the JSPs through the app.